Oh, you're going to look incredible in this one. Relax. Let go. Let yourself slip into something exquisite, something effortless, something unforgettable. And when you're ready, baby, dream of a new life.
My Best Friend's Girlfriend by Catherine Serafina. Chapter 5. I hefted the sleek EvoSkin box onto the dining table, its weight a tangible reminder of the madness I was about to confront. My muscles tensed as I stared at it, trying to convince myself that I wasn't about to open Pandora's box. Beside me, Garrett practically vibrated with anticipation, his eyes gleaming like a kid waiting to unwrap the world's coolest toy. "Let's get this over with," I muttered, breaking the seal with more care than I felt the moment deserved. The box opened with an almost theatrical elegance, revealing an interior lined with pristine white foam. Everything was nestled in its place with an obsessive precision that could only come from a company like Neoforma Labs. It felt more like unboxing some luxury gadget than a biotech creation that would literally change my body. My gaze drifted to a small cluster of sleek bottles tucked into a compartment. The glass glinted under the dining room lights, the contents catching the light in an almost hypnotic way. They looked like high-end lotions or oils, no doubt meant to prepare my skin for whatever horrifying science was about to take place. "Skin prep," Garrett offered helpfully, nodding at the bottles like he was a salesman presenting a premium feature. I ignored him, my attention drawn to the paperwork tucked in another compartment. A thick stack of manuals, disclaimers, and diagrams sat neatly arranged, practically screaming, "Read me if you value your life." Garrett's hand shot out for them like a kid reaching for cookies, but I slapped it away before he got close. I said firmly, pulling the stack free. "If I'm putting this thing on my body, I'm reading the fine print first." He sighed, dramatically leaning back in his chair like I was ruining all his fun. "Fine, but don't take all night. We still need to, test it." I shot him a glare over the top of the papers but said nothing, already absorbed in the dense technical language. The diagrams were intricate, the disclaimers unsettlingly thorough. Words like adaptive biostructure and cellular integration leapt off the page, each one more unnerving than the last. I forced myself to focus, my determination to understand what I was getting into outweighing the gnawing unease in my stomach. Garrett paced the living room, nursing his third, then fourth beer, as I painstakingly combed through the thick stack of instructions and paperwork that came with the EvoSkin. It wasn't exactly light reading, but I wasn't about to jump into this without knowing exactly what I was signing up for. "Come on, Peter," Garrett groaned, flopping onto the couch like a kid denied dessert. "It's not rocket science. Just put it on already." I ignored him, flipping to the next page. "This is the part about the bonding agents," I muttered, scanning the densely worded manual. "One bottle goes inside the suit, the other on your skin. It's not glue, but it links the suit to your body so the tech can communicate." "Fascinating," Garrett said with mock enthusiasm, barely looking up from his beer. "No, put it on." I shot him a glare over the top of the papers. "This is my body, Garrett. If something goes wrong, I'm the one stuck dealing with it. I'm not rushing this." "You've been reading that for half an hour," he whined, throwing his hands up. "What's there to overthink? Just try it already." "I'm making sure I don't die," I retorted, snapping the manual shut for emphasis. "You're not gonna die," he said, rolling his eyes. "This thing's been tested 1,000,000 times. Trust me, you're fine." "Says the guy not putting it on," I muttered, but I could feel my resolve slipping. I sighed and flipped through the last few pages. "Fine, but if this thing malfunctions because I skipped something important, I'm blaming you." "Deal," Garrett said, his face lighting up with excitement as he leapt to his feet. "Let's go." I reached into the box, pulling out the EvoSkin. The synthetic material was warm to the touch, its unsettlingly lifelike texture sending a shiver up my spine. It hung limp in my hands, the red hair spilling over the edges like a fiery waterfall. "All right," I muttered, swallowing hard as I turned toward the hallway. "I'm taking this to my room to do this." Garrett followed, his grin plastered on his face like he was witnessing the start of a magic show. His footsteps echoed in the silence, amplifying the weight of the moment. When I reached my bedroom door, I stopped and turned to face him. "What are you doing?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "I'm coming with you," he said innocently, though the gleam in his eyes said otherwise. "Quality control." I raised an eyebrow. "You just want to see my junk, don't you?" Garrett burst into laughter, doubling over as tears formed in the corners of his eyes. "Okay, guilty," he admitted, still wheezing. "But seriously, you're going to be fine. This is going to work." I couldn't help but chuckle along with him, even as the absurdity of the situation pressed heavily on my chest. Yeah, I said, shaking my head. "Enough jokes." He clapped me on the back, grinning ear to ear. "Let's get this show on the road." With a final glance, I stepped into the bedroom and shut the door behind me. The quiet that followed was deafening. I placed the EvoSkin carefully on the bed and turned to face the mirror, staring at my reflection as the enormity of what I was about to do sank in. This wasn't just dressing up for a joke. This wasn't a costume or a role to play. This was transformation. The line between who I was and who I would become was suddenly all too clear. "This is it," I murmured, my voice quiet. Point of no return. I picked up the EvoSkin, its strange warmth seeping into my fingers. I thought about Garrett's dumb jokes, his relentless confidence, and, despite myself, they gave me a strange sense of comfort. "Here goes everything," I whispered, taking a deep, steadying breath as I prepared to cross the line into the unknown. I laid the EvoSkin out on the bed, smoothing it flat like a craftsman preparing a canvas. The bonding solution glistened on its inner surface, a thin, tacky layer that I'd meticulously worked into every inch of the material, just as the instructions had demanded. My fingertips had traced the strange, lifelike curves and contours of its diminutive form, each pass making the reality of what I was about to do settle deeper into my gut. The skin stared back at me, empty and limp, like the discarded husk of some lifelike doll. It was grotesque in its perfection, a hollow version of the person I was about to become. The fiery cascade of red hair framed its empty face, making it look disturbingly human, and yet impossibly alien. I stood there, completely exposed, my skin prickling in the cool air. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break free, each beat a sharp reminder of what lay ahead. This wasn't just some joke or favor for Garrett. This was transformation. "What the actual fuck am I doing?" I muttered, my voice breaking the silence. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm me, and for a moment, I couldn't move. My mind reeled with second thoughts, cycling through every bad decision that had brought me to this moment. I'd committed to this, shaken hands, given my word. But now, standing face to face with this bizarre monstrosity, it felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. The instructions had been clear about the process. Every detail had been mapped out no matter how strange or uncomfortable. One particular line stuck out in my mind, buried among the technical jargon like it didn't belong there. "Ensure the subject is physically and mentally relaxed prior to full application." I stared at the sentence for a long moment, letting out a slow breath. "Relaxed," I muttered under my breath. "Yeah, that's not happening." I sat down on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the suit laid out in front of me. Up close, it was even more unsettling. The proportions, the shape, the quiet implication of what it would become once I stepped into it. This wasn't just clothing. This was something else, entirely. I dragged a hand through my hair, trying to steady my thoughts. My heart was still racing, my body tense in a way I couldn't quite shake. "Get it together," I muttered. I forced myself to slow down, taking a few steady breaths, letting the moment stretch just long enough for the initial shock to dull into something more manageable. Not calm exactly, but controlled. That would have to be enough. I stood again, exhaling slowly, and reached for the second vial of bonding solution. "Focus!" I muttered, forcing myself to my feet. I grabbed the second vial of bonding solution, its viscous contents shimmering under the bedroom light. The first touch was cold, sending goosebumps racing across my arms as I worked the substance over my skin. It tingled faintly at first, a sensation that quickly intensified into a buzzing warmth as I coated my chest, arms, legs, every inch of my body. The instructions had been explicit: leave no area untouched, even the intimate parts. The sensation was uncomfortable, alien, like marinating myself in liquid technology. "All right," I said, my voice shaking. "Here we go." I turned to the EvoSkin, its sickly realistic texture somehow more unsettling now. The red hair spilled over the bed like a synthetic river, its vibrant color mocking me. Taking a deep breath, I lifted the skin, the material limp and eerily pliable in my hands. The first step was the hardest. I slid one foot into the suit, the material clinging like a second skin as it stretched unnaturally to accommodate me. It was tight. Too tight. Like pulling on a wetsuit 2 sizes too small. It resisted every inch of progress, yet refused to tear or yield. "God, this is ridiculous," I muttered, gritting my teeth as I worked my other leg into the suit. The material pulled taut around my thighs, molding itself to every curve and muscle. By the time I reached my waist, the pressure was almost suffocating. And then there was the functionality pouch. I stared at it for a moment, my lips curling in disgust. Functionality? They'd said. What a joke. It was a grotesque little space meant to contain everything I was. With a resigned grimace, I adjusted myself into the pouch. The suit stretched further, molding around me in a way that felt disturbingly final. This wasn't just uncomfortable. It was wrong. Alien. A part of me screamed to rip it off, to throw it across the room and walk away. But I couldn't. Not now. I took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "No turning back," I whispered, the words sounding hollow in the stillness of the room. And with that, I reached for the arms of the suit, ready to finish what I'd started. I hauled the EvoSkin over my hips, my breath hitching as I fought against the unyielding material. It stretched unnaturally, but even so, the fit was wrong. The fabric bunched awkwardly at my sides, sagging in places that were supposed to be rounded and full. The exaggerated feminine shape mocked me, its empty curves a grotesque reminder of what I wasn't. "This is already a disaster," I muttered, pausing to catch my breath. The waist was the next challenge, and it was merciless. As I tugged the material upward, it cinched around me with a vice-like grip, forcing the air from my lungs. "God," I gasped, pulling at the fabric in a futile attempt to ease the pressure. It wasn't just snug. It felt like the suit was trying to reshape me, to mold my body into something it was never meant to be. I glanced at the mirror, catching sight of my reflection, a jarring mix of my exposed skin and the pale, lifeless synthetic material. The patchwork was unsettling, like I was halfway through some botched magic trick. "This is insane," I muttered under my breath, shaking my head in disbelief. But there was no going back now. With a grim sense of determination, I tackled one of the suit's limp sleeves, guiding my hand into the tight opening. The material resisted every step, clinging to my fingers, my wrist, and my forearm with a tenacity that made me grit my teeth. When my hand finally emerged, I flexed my fingers experimentally. I could move, sure, but the sensation was alien, the synthetic skin clinging to me like a too-tight glove. I shifted uncomfortably, then wrestled my other arm into the second sleeve. It was no easier than the first. The fabric stretched, twisted, and strained as I worked it over my muscles, each tug an exhausting battle. By the time both arms were encased, I was sweating, my reflection showing the strange, pallid material stretched taut over my limbs. The contrast between my natural skin and the suit was striking, a disturbing patchwork of mismatched tones that sent a chill down my spine. "Why am I doing this?" I muttered, running a hand over my face. Garrett's voice echoed in my head, full of that maddening, unearned confidence. "This is going to work, Peter. You'll be fine." Easy for him to say. The torso of the suit was next, and it was the worst yet. The tightness around my chest made it almost impossible to breathe, the material fighting every movement as I struggled to pull it up. My broad shoulders, once a point of pride, felt like obstacles now, defying every attempt to squeeze them into the constricting fabric. "Come on," I grunted, yanking with all the strength I could muster. The material stretched, but it didn't tear. It didn't yield. It just clung tighter, like the suit itself was determined to overpower me. Sweat trickled down my brow as I gave one final, desperate pull, finally forcing the torso into place. Panting, I stood before the mirror, my chest heaving as I adjusted the suit with trembling hands. The sight that greeted me was something out of a nightmare. The pale synthetic skin stretched unnaturally over my body, clinging in some places and sagging in others. And then there were the chest pieces, the empty, hollow shapes meant to mimic breasts. I stared at them, the lifeless mounds dangling limply from the suit's front. They weren't just bizarre, they were unnerving. Tentatively, I reached out, brushing a fingertip over the surface. The texture was soft, pliable, disturbingly close to real skin, but it was cold and devoid of life. I recoiled, shaking my head. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, the words hollow in the quiet room. I tugged at the suit's torso, trying to adjust it into something that resembled a proper fit, but it was a futile effort. The material clung like a second skin, digging into my shoulders and sides with relentless precision. Every movement felt wrong, tight, constricted, unnatural. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating, like the suit was swallowing me whole. I forced myself to focus, to push past the discomfort. The transformation wasn't complete, not yet. But as I stood there staring at the distorted figure in the mirror, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that I was losing something. My identity, my control. I was no longer just Peter. I was becoming something else. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I hated it or if some twisted part of me was curious to see how far this would go. Almost entirely encased now, with only the headpiece and the final sealing of the back remaining, the surreal weight of the EvoSkin was becoming unbearable. I glanced at the closed door, hesitation gnawing at me, before an impulsive thought surfaced. Why not let Garrett witness the grand finale? He'd been hounding me through this entire process like a kid hyped up on sugar, and maybe seeing this through would finally shut him up. With a resigned shrug, I walked over to the door and unlocked it. "Garrett, get in here." The door swung open so fast it nearly hit the wall. Garrett burst in, grinning ear to ear, his eyes gleaming with excitement. But the second he saw me standing there, half transformed, swathed in this grotesque synthetic shell, his expression shifted. His grin wavered, giving way to an awkward contortion somewhere between incredulous laughter and outright horror. "Oh my God," he sputtered, half laughing, half gagging. "Peter, you look like something out of a horror movie, like the bad guy who wears people's skin." "Thanks," I said dryly, crossing my arms. Exactly the confidence boost I needed. Garrett fought to stifle his laughter, pressing a fist to his mouth as his shoulders shook. "No, seriously, it's horrifying in the best way." "Just focus," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I need your help with the headpiece." His expression sobered slightly, though his mouth still twitched with suppressed amusement. "All right, fine. What do you need?" I held up the limp, hollow headpiece, its lifeless face and synthetic red hair dangling like something out of a macabre puppet show. "Help me get this on without suffocating, okay? Make sure the eyes, nose, and mouth line up, or else I'm going to pass out in this damn thing." Garrett hesitated for a beat, then nodded, stepping closer. "Got it. Let's do this." He took the headpiece from my outstretched hand, his fingers brushing against mine briefly. The material felt cold and disturbingly lifelike, even to the touch. He adjusted the headpiece carefully, positioning it over my face as I leaned forward to help. The sensation of the synthetic flesh stretching over my features was invasive, the grooves inside aligning far too perfectly with the contours of my face. As it slid into place, I flinched instinctively when the material tightened over my nose and mouth. A spike of panic shot through me as my breath caught, and I clawed at the edges, desperate for air. "Breathe through your nose," Garrett said sharply, his voice tight with both urgency and fascination. He adjusted the edges, and suddenly air flowed freely again. I exhaled shakily, nodding. "Better," I mumbled, my voice muffled and unfamiliar beneath the layers of synthetic flesh. I turned to face the mirror, bracing myself for what I might see. The reflection staring back was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just grotesque, it was nightmarish. The pallid, lifeless skin clung to my face, not yet adapted to resemble anything human. Hollow, empty eyes stared back, and the limp synthetic hair only added to the unsettling tableau. I looked like a monster, a caricature of humanity, trapped in a shell that didn't belong to me. Jesus, I muttered, recoiling from the mirror. My stomach twisted, and for a moment, I thought I might vomit. Yeah, Garrett's voice trailed off as he tilted his head, examining me with a mix of morbid curiosity and unease. It's a lot. No kidding, I said, shaking my head. My voice sounded wrong, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I turned away from the mirror, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. Let's just finish this. Garrett nodded, stepping behind me. The back of the EvoSkin gaped open, the final barrier between me and whatever I was about to become. His hands hovered over the edges of the opening, hesitant. "All right," he said softly, his voice laced with an odd finality. "Here goes nothing." As his fingers worked to seal the back of the suit, I felt it begin to stir against my skin, a subtle tightening, a faint tingling, like the suit itself was coming to life. My breath caught in my throat as the sensation spread, and for a moment, everything fell unnervingly still. I sat motionless, staring at the grotesque reflection in the mirror. The seconds stretched into eternity as I braced myself for whatever transformation lay ahead. Like a tidal wave, the bonding solution surged to life, flooding my body with a current of sensation so intense it stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but it was overwhelming. Every nerve seemed to ignite at once, a hum of electricity rippling through me as if I were being rewired from the inside out. My fingers dug into the arms of the chair as I gasped, trying to anchor myself against the tide of transformation sweeping through me. And then, the changes began. It was subtle at first, like an invisible force reshaping me from the core outward. My broad shoulders began to narrow, my chest compressed, and my muscles melted away like wax under a relentless flame. The EvoSkin didn't just cling to my body, it was becoming my body, molding and remaking me to fit its delicate, feminine design. I felt myself shrinking, my frame compressing into something smaller, lighter, entirely alien. The suffocating tightness around my waist eased, replaced by a strange, taut sensation as my torso slimmed into an impossibly narrow silhouette. My hands trembled as I glanced at the mirror. The grotesque suit that had hung awkwardly moments ago was now merging with me, its contours molding to my form until it no longer seemed like a suit at all. I shifted uneasily, a soft gasp escaping me as my hips flared outward. The sensation was bizarre, a mix of pressure and something quite unfamiliar. My once flat buttocks lifted and rounded beneath me, their shape filling out the seat in a way that felt simultaneously foreign and natural. I squirmed, unable to ignore how my body moved differently, every shift emphasizing the new curves that hadn't existed minutes ago. Then, I noticed the chest. The lifeless mounds of synthetic flesh that had dangled from the suit's front were changing. They swelled, blossoming into full, rounded breasts, their weight settling on my now slender ribcage. I froze, watching the transformation unfold with a mix of awe and disbelief. The sensation was startlingly real, an unfamiliar heaviness pulling at my chest, accompanied by a strange sense of balance, as though my body had been recalibrated. Hesitantly, my hand drifted upward, my fingers brushing over the smooth, warm surface of my new skin. The shock of feeling my own touch, soft, pliant, undeniably real, sent a shiver down my spine. These were my breasts now, fully real in a way that left no room for doubt. My breath hitched, the tactile reality of it almost too much to process. I glanced at my hand, now elegant and dainty, with long, manicured fingers that bore no resemblance to the blunt, callous digits I'd lived with my entire life. Turning it over, I marveled at the delicate wrist and the silky fairness of my forearm. Every inch of me was being rewritten, the EvoSkin reshaping me into its vision of perfection. I couldn't resist bringing my hand to my face, my fingers trailing over the soft curve of my cheek, the fullness of my lips. The sensation was sharp and immediate, every touch heightened as though my body was hyper-aware of its new form. It felt alive, real, mine. Behind me, Garrett stood frozen, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief as he watched the transformation. For once, he was speechless, his usual humor silenced by the sight of what I'd become. His eyes flickered between me and the mirror, as if trying to reconcile the petite, red-haired woman before him with the man who had been his best friend. I turned back to the mirror, and my breath caught. Staring back at me was someone else, a stunning woman with delicate features and striking curves. Her cascade of fiery red hair framed a face that was at once unfamiliar and captivating, her body an exquisite creation of science and art. Yet, as I stared, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was me. Fucking insane, I whispered, the sound of my voice startling me. It was soft, lilting, feminine, so alien it sent a chill through me. I swallowed hard, the unfamiliar motion of my throat only reinforcing how completely I had changed. Garrett finally spoke, his tone low and reverent. "Holy shit, Peter, it worked." I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the mirror. My fingers grazed the fullness of my lips, trailing down to the smooth line of my jaw, then lower to the gentle curve of my collarbone. Every touch sent ripples of sensation through me, the vividness of it impossible to ignore. "It's real," I murmured, my voice trembling. "It all feels so real. Too fucking real." The weight of what had happened bore down on me, the enormity of the transformation finally sinking in. My body was no longer mine, not in the way it once was. I was beautiful, breathtaking even. But the price of this perfection was a disorienting loss of self. I wasn't sure if I was in awe of the EvoSkin's brilliance or terrified of the person staring back at me. One thing was certain: nothing about my life would ever be the same again. Garrett's voice broke through my stunned silence, hesitant but laced with an almost morbid curiosity. "Hey, Peter." He paused, then shook his head. "I mean, Ksenia, sorry, I hate to be crude, but is it complete, like, really complete?" The question hit like a slap, snapping me back into the moment. I blinked at him, his expression a mix of awe and something else. Disbelief, unease. I frowned, not immediately grasping his meaning. "What are you talking about?" His gaze flickered downward, then back up to meet mine, as if debating whether to press forward. He swallowed. Your cock." The word barely made it past his lips, like he was afraid of saying it out loud. "Is it still?" The air between us grew thick, a charged silence stretching long enough for the implications to settle. My stomach tightened. The transformation had felt all-encompassing, reshaping me from head to toe, but I hadn't dared to check. Now, with Garrett's question hanging in the air like a live wire, there was no avoiding it. Slowly, with a growing sense of apprehension, I let my gaze drift downward, past the unfamiliar curve of my breasts, over my now narrow waist to the space between my thighs. I hesitated. Then, carefully, I looked. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was like staring at something that didn't belong to me, something that couldn't possibly be real. But it was. Everything was different. Completely. A cold shock ran through me, stealing the breath from my lungs as the reality settled in. The transformation hadn't stopped at the surface. It hadn't skipped anything. There was no trace of what had been there before. No halfway point. No compromise. It was total. Holy... The word died in my throat as I stared, my mind scrambling to catch up with what my eyes were telling me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look away, my pulse hammering in my ears. The weight of it hit all at once. Not just the physical change, but what it meant. There was no undoing this in the way I'd imagined. No simple line between before and after. This was complete. And then, like a delayed explosion, another realization hit. I was sitting there completely naked in front of Garrett. "Oh, fuck." I jolted upright. heat rushing to my face as I snatched the nearest towel from the dresser and wrapped it around myself. My arms clutched it tight, like a flimsy shield against the enormity of what had just happened. Garrett immediately raised his hands, palms out in surrender. "Hey, sorry, I wasn't trying to— I just had to know." His voice was defensive, but his wide-eyed stare told me everything. He was just as thrown as I was. I shot him a withering glare, though my heart was still hammering in my chest. "Yeah, well, next time, maybe don't make me feel like a goddamn science experiment." He winced. "Fair." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I kept my death grip on the towel, my breath still uneven, my mind reeling. Garrett's gaze flicked toward the mirror, then back to me, as if he still couldn't fully believe what he was seeing. "This is fucking insane," he murmured, almost to himself. You're her, you're Ksenia." I exhaled shakily, hesitating before turning back to the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked just as shaken, her delicate fingers clutching the towel, her cheeks flushed, her emerald eyes wide with lingering disbelief. "Yeah," I said softly, the word feeling strange, heavy, final. "I guess I am." Garrett nodded slowly, as if he too was just now grasping the full weight of it. For the first time since this insane idea had begun, the humor drained from his face, replaced with something closer to reverence. He had gotten what he wanted. Ksenia was real, and she was me. A thick silence settled between us, both of us lost in our own thoughts. There was no undoing this, no going back. I was Ksenia now. And the scariest part? I didn't hate it.
This was just supposed to be a disguise. So why did it feel like something else entirely?
Still lost in the dream, aren't you? Don't worry, I've got plenty more where that came from. Sweet, sexy, transformative little dreams. All just a click away. And if you're craving the naughty versions, the ones too hot for YouTube, you know exactly where to find them. On my Patreon. I'll be waiting